So we're getting into our first real body system now. Up until this point, we've been doing a lot of background work, a lot of stuff that is setting ourselves up for the different body systems, right? So you need to make sure that everything we covered in the first bit, you retain a good amount of that, because we're going to be building off of that, looking at specifics within the body that use those general concepts we covered earlier. So for our first body system, we're gonna kind of hit the ground running with the endocrine system. For this first video, we're gonna just focus on the kind of introduction to the endocrine system, kind of talk about it in its entirety, and then talk about endocrine versus exocrine, compare and contrast them, and then talk about some of the different types of organs we'll find, talk about some examples and the hormones they make. Later on in this chapter, we'll go into what hormones are and how they function, the different types of hormones. And then for the rest of the videos, we'll kind of piece by piece go through the main players of the endocrine system. So when it comes to communication in the body, right? Communication, control, coordination, however you want to put it, there's two main body systems that help with this, and that is the nervous system and the endocrine system. Both of them together help with the coordination and control of the body. However, they have very different ways of doing that, right? So if we let's kind of look at these two, because these are some of the ones, the big ones we're going to be getting into in this class. So the nervous system is going to use electrical impulses. We're going to call those action potentials later on. Whereas the endocrine system uses chemical signals, right? Hormones. So we have a difference in how we communicate, right? The method of communication and the pathways that we take. So for your nervous system, you're sending these electrical impulses along neurons, right, through nerves, whereas the endocrine system will primarily rely on the bloodstream. Since the nervous system uses electrical impulses, those are very, very fast, and the endocrine system is slower. Now, that being said, the nervous system sends signals very fast, but the effect is very short. So if you need to have a quick change in that moment, and you don't need that change to happen for very long, or you don't need that action to happen for very long, nervous system's fantastic. With the endocrine system, it's generally a slower speed of information, but we can have a more sustained signal. With the nervous system, we do have some voluntary control. So you think about like your ability to your conscious thought, your ability to think and control like your own body, like your own movements, right? There's voluntary components to the nervous system. Whereas the endocrine system, you do not consciously think about that, right? It's going to happen without you thinking. With the nervous system, we're looking at localized, meaning like the cells that are going to be controlled or coordinated by the nervous system are going to actually be connected to the neuron, right? There's going to be, like, let's say we're talking about muscles, there's going to be a neuromuscular junction, right? Where the neuron and the muscle are like almost exactly in contact with each other. Whereas the endocrine system, our target can be systemic. We're going to target cells that are way far away and do not have any direct connection to those cells. If we look at endocrine versus exocrine too, there's kind of like two different types of glands that we have, and really it just comes down to how we secrete, right? Both of them are going to secrete things, right? They make something, a hormone, an enzyme, whatever. So they're gonna both secrete those, but how we secrete them, like where those things end up, where those products end up, is different. So exocrine, think duct. Endocrine, think blood. So that's kind of like the quick and dirty. But exocrine, we're going to basically make a product and it's going to go into a duct, and then that duct is going to be like a direct pipeline to whatever the target site is. So a good example are like the salivary glands in your mouth, the oil glands in your skin, right? They're glands, they're producing things like saliva, producing things like sebaceous oils or whatever, right? Sebum. And then there's a direct pathway for those components out to the target. So if we're talking about the skin, right, out to the surface of the skin. Nothing else is really going to go through that pathway, right? That duct is made for that secretion to be carried through. Whereas an endocrine gland, we're going to be pushing those hormones into the interstitial fluid, and then it can be taken up by the bloodstream. And so this is more for, we want to send something, a signal out to a lot of different parts. We want to send that hormone out into a part of the body that is far away, right? And so we're going to basically send it to our body's highway system, the bloodstream. So we're going to be kind of focusing on the endocrine glands for the endocrine system, right? Some of the things we're going to talk about do have more than one thing they can do. Like the pancreas has endocrine functions, but it also has exocrine functions. We're going to focus on endocrine, though, when looking at the endocrine system. Well, if anything has exocrine stuff that we're going to look at, we'll look at it later when we get there. So we can also kind of further classify the endocrine organs based on, are they primary, are they secondary, or are they neuroendocrine? So the primary endocrine organs, these are the ones that basically they're primarily involved in making hormones. So they're going to directly make hormones that you need. So like your pituitary gland makes hormones. Your thyroid, your parathyroids make hormones. Your adrenal cortex, your pancreas, your ovaries, your testes, those all make hormones. That's like their job, right? They're one of the main big things they do is they make these hormones. Secondary endocrine organs, they do produce some hormones, but that's not the main job that they have. So like the heart, for example, when we think of the heart, you don't think endocrine, you think cardiovascular, because that's the heart's main job, right? That's what the heart is known for. It's known for pumping blood around the body. But it does have a little bit of, it does produce some, hormone. It produces atrial natriuretic hormone, or ANH, which is going to help with your water-salt balance. And so it does produce a hormone, right, ANH in this case, but that's not the primary duty of the heart. And so same thing with like the intestine, same thing with the kidneys, same thing with fat tissue, the placenta. They produce a hormone or hormones, but that's not the main thing they're known for. They're known for doing something else that's a little bit bigger function. And then neuroendocrine tissues, this is where we're kind of blurring the lines between endocrine and nervous system. And so they're going to be tissues made of nervous tissue, but they also secrete hormones when they get stimulated by the nervous system. So things like the hypothalamus, right? The hypothalamus is kind of, I like to think of it like the bridge between the nervous and the endocrine systems. The adrenal medulla is going to have a direct connection to the nervous system when it comes to the production of things like adrenaline, right? Epinephrine, norepinephrine. The pineal gland and the posterior pituitary lobe, those are going to have a kind of an intertwining or like an interweaving between the nervous system and the endocrine system. And so I'm not going to read all these because we are going to have our chance to, so don't, if you want to pause here and look through this, you can. But we will get into each of these when we look at our the next videos. But this would be a good, table to kind of look at if you want to get an overview of everything. Now, the ones we see here are all primary, meaning this is their job. Their main focus is to be an endocrine organ. So like the adrenal cortex, the pancreatic beta islet cells, the ovaries, the parathyroid glands, the pituitary glands, anterior lobe, or what we sometimes call the anterior pituitary, the testes, the thyroid. This list here is all primary. So their job, like their primary function, is to produce hormones, send those hormones out, right? Have some sort of control and coordination over the body. Whereas what we see here, right, adipose or fat tissue, the heart, small intestines, kidneys, liver, skin, stomach, thymus, placenta, right, all these these are all secondary functions, right? They're secondary endocrine organs. They have what they have a bigger function, or they have another function that's kind of that they're responsible for, that's kind of bigger. And endocrine is more of just like a side gig, right? It's still important, right? You wouldn't, like, if your kidneys did not produce erythropoietin, you wouldn't necessarily be able to produce more red blood cells if that count was too low. Like, that's how you're going to stimulate that production when that's detected. So it's not to say that the jobs that these organs do is less important. It's just that's not the main focus. It's not what that organ is known for. And then these are the neuroendocrine, again, kind of connecting nervous and endocrine systems together: adrenal medulla, hypothalamus, pineal gland, and then the posterior pituitary.